SMSFs have been described as the original disruptor of the superannuation sector. But it seems now the disruptor is being disrupted itself. Joining me today is NowInfinity Principal Grant Abbott to discuss this issue. Welcome, Grant.
Hi Darren, how are you?
I'm very well. So the disruptor is being disrupted, and one of the areas that you've kind of identified is venture capital. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think what we've seen, and certainly from the 1st of July, once the government gets into crowdfunding, a lot of the money that's going into venture capital, private equity, a lot of it is sourced inside, is sourced from self-managed superannuation funds, as opposed to the larger funds which tend not to go down that ilk. What's happening though is obviously with low interest rates and the central banks around the world almost running negative interest rates at some point, the retiree or the investor inside self-managed super fund can't invest in cash because otherwise they're going backwards. So they're looking for something that's a bit more entrepreneurial, a bit more avant-garde. And venture capital, again, particularly, maybe not the first stage, but the second or third stage where there's a bit more just pre-IPO, that seems to be taking in a lot of appetite. Although I have seen someone put a $200,000 investment in a self-managed superannuation fund and then IPO 18 months later for $20 million. And by that stage, the person was in, obviously they'd switched over to the pension stage and it was tax-free. So again, there's some good opportunities there, but obviously with VCs, you need to be really on top of what the investment is.
So it looks like the SMSF sector is continuing that disruption sort of capability that they have and have had in the past. So angel investment is another area that you've sort of highlighted too.
Yeah, well VC, I mean, if you have a look at the stages of and again, IPOs are pretty hot and flashy. I mean, they'll go up and they'll go down. But by the very nature, if you have a look at, there's going to be $2.5 trillion sitting in superannuation within the next, say, 7 to 10 years. With the current ASX at probably about, 1.1 trillion. You think, where's all this money actually going to invest in? So there's a huge appetite for IPOs. So you've got your innovation statement that the government has actually released now, which for startup companies that have got less than $5 million in net worth, then you can invest in those guys. What's an interesting strategy, and I'll be looking at this strategies day, is that when you invest in there, you get a 20% tax rebate, which we're still waiting for the legislation, but that may well ameliorate your contributions tax. So that for an individual probably, obviously angel investment is very risky. So if you're like 60, you're not going to do it. But for young guys like yourself, or if you've got money in self-managed, they find maybe a fintech business that they've done their due diligence on, put their money in, get a 20% rebate, don't pay contributions tax, and more importantly, the sellout within 10 years' time is capital gains tax free inside the fund. So it's a nice little play around with maybe 5 to 10 or 15%. But as I said, I've seen before where people have put in or parlay 200,000 into $20 million. But again, these are sort of things I'm going to really rip to pieces in the strategy day.
Now, there's been a bit of talk about peer-to-peer lending as well, which sort of fits into that category too, but maybe on a slightly broader perspective, is that right?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and particularly around the government's LRBAs, which is going to be another area I want to talk about a lot in the strategies day, is that related party lending that effectively people need to refinance. The banks are not reticent, but they're pulling back away from LRBAs because simply they believe it's too risky capital in terms of what they need to have as that capital base from APRA. So they prefer to do investment-only loans. So what's happening there is NAB pulled out, ANZ pulled out. Commonwealth Bank really never had a good product there anyway, so it's just sort of left to Westpac at St George. But again, the costs are going up, it's a lot harder. Now we can have peer-to-peer lending, and I know there's a couple of platforms that are doing it now. We're working with one group called Lendex, and where self-managed super funds themselves can go onto a platform and lend to other SMSFs around LRBAs, or for example to small to medium enterprises around equipment financing, stuff like that. So that's a disruption to the banking industry, but again it's pulling that money back into a sector where there's $650 billion which is SMSFs, and probably 220 billion of that is cash, giving those people a better cash return over a period of time. These are straight income plays. They're not like the angel investment VCs. That's a capital play and a really strong capital play, whereas this is more income play. And look, I know a lot of people come to the SMSF Strategies Day are going to really be blown away by some of the peer-to-peer lending stuff that's coming down the horizon.
And on a slightly unrelated topic, but still an area of change at the moment, there's been a bit happening around binding death benefit nominations.
Yeah.
What's been going on there?
There's a lot. There seems to be a case almost every month or every 2 or 3 months, and if you think that's the case there's obviously a lot coming through. Around binding death benefit nominations, it's just simply the procedures and the systems and the documentations have been put together in order for these binding nominations has effectively been thrown out by the court, leaving the remaining trustee, which quite often is antagonist to someone who's actually in the estate. So it might be the spouse versus the children for the first marriage, or sister versus brother. And then what happens from there is that effectively, from that perspective, that there's a fight, and then it ends up, because the binding death benefit nominations have been very poor, that it means that the person who remains in control of it is the trustee. So there's a lot of mechanism of strategy we'll be covering on Strategy Day to get around that, and particularly looking at the big drive at the moment we're finding with a lot of success our advisor having is in localising bloodline benefits only to obviously the bloodline. So even if it goes through the trust estate. And I think it's a really good growth opportunity there for a lot of advisors in the SMSF space, because you are licensed to give advice around, well, in fact, you have to give estate planning advice. Whereas the lawyers themselves, probably, there's not too many who are up to speed in this area. So I see it as a great opportunity along with aged care and all these other stuff. So we've actually got a whole lot of strategies we'll be looking at across the day that are really going to benefit, people who might even a 25-year-old with the SMSF to people up, with dementia at 80, 85 years of age.
Now, we've discussed obviously a range of topics that, as you've said, you will be discussing or going into more depth on the 2016 SMSF Strategies Day. Are there any other sort of topics you'd like to highlight that will be covered as well?
Yeah, I talked about bloodline. I'll be looking at in-depth of the LRBA stuff from the tax office, how to refinance, what needs to be done there. I also want to look at probably the utilisation of borrowing outside an LRBA. So using a superannuation investment trust, using a 1322C trust or a joint venture. At Now Infinity Legal will be doing a lot of stuff between family trusts and SMSFs, doing joint ventures to do property development. Or alternatively, I want to show people how to buy businesses inside a self-managed super fund. So it's not like IPO stuff, it's actually real businesses, even financial planning trailing commission, or you have a look at property management fees from real estate. So I'm going to want to show everyone how you do that. Aged care, from my perspective, I've been through the ringer in the last 2 months with my father going to aged care. I've seen the documentation. I've seen my mum lie prostrate on the floor because the whole thing is an absolute nightmare. And we're on top of it. So I want to go through, because there's a lot of stings in the tail in terms of funding aged care with a fundable accommodation deposit. So I want to go through that, and also show particularly the planners, and notwithstanding that, even the accountants out there, how to really have a look at using some of the modern financial planning software like Xplan or Midwinter or Coin, and start to cash flow, but making sure that people have got enough money in those last few years of their life to be able to fund that refundable accommodation deposit, which a lot of people can do, but I have to show them the nuances around SMSFs, because it's not much good getting the 550, which you have to put in a refundable accommodation deposit, pull it out, and then the person dies 3 months later, then you can't put it back in for the next generation spouse or the spouse. So I'll be looking at a lot of those. And at the end of the day, I want to go through probably the top 10 questions or strategies we've got on foot at the moment. Anti-detriment, I want to show the advisor, I want to show them how we'll give them a really good business plan, a tool, simple Excel spreadsheet to show them how to really make a lot of money, at least $100,000 or more in the next year with their SMSF. We'll be looking at anti-detriment. We've got some financial planners who are selling them for like $3,000 a pop, and have sold probably about 10 or 15, which is a really good stuff at the bottom line. QROPS, not everyone knows it, but they made big changes last year. I want to have a look at that sort of stuff. So I've packed in as much as I can. It's my 10th year, so I'm pretty good at doing it now, but we're going to cover absolutely everything because it is a day of disruption. I want to look at all those little things that are disrupting. As I said, SMSFs are by their very nature disruptor, but we're getting disrupted. I just want to go down and even have a look and show people how to do automated strategies so that a whole range of things are done that can be done in an office in about 20 minutes. But that then has an impact because unless we've got the goods, someone out there is actually going to do that in an app that is then going to impact, and you'll find a lot more direct when it comes down to Gen X and Gen Y. So we'll be going through all of that. Offshoring, outsourcing, having a look at the two variables there, and we'll have a look at some of the platforms, the admin platforms that people can go now with direct access that cost nothing in order to do SMSF admin. So really, if you're an auditor, administrator, accountant, planner, or anyone doing this, it's absolutely essential to come along and see what's happening now in terms of disruption. We're not talking about stuff that came out ages ago. We're talking about this is the stuff right at the moment because I'm fortunate to see everything that's going on in the marketplace.
Okay, so that's the 2016 SMSF Strategies Day. It's being presented across all capital cities plus some regionals, and we start in Adelaide on the 8th of July. If you want some more information about this event or to register, please visit www.smsmagazine.com.au/events. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. It's great. See you on the Strategies Day.